All he was saying is, hey, there might be DNA evidence here. They did this sex assault kit. Can you just test the DNA? I didn't do it. The prosecuting attorney's office and the police department are refusing to reopen the investigation and allowing the true suspect to run free.
Tell me, who is this person?
You know, when someone is innocent and they've been charged and convicted of a crime that somebody else committed, that's something that the entire community deals with, because then a guilty person is still out there.
Welcome to Socialite Crime Club. What kind of scandalous controversy are we bringing socialites today?
We're going to continue down the road of wrongful convictions. If you think back to the Kirsten Lobato, the small town girl case, in that case, we showed how an entire group of people completely screwed up the criminal justice system for this wrongful conviction. Well, today we're going to illustrate what can happen when a singular person chooses to pervert the criminal justice system for the sole reason of self-promotion. So let's just jump into this. No names have been changed for this episode.
Ooh.
All the locations, the dates, the people, everybody's real. I love these episodes because I get to call out people and I kind of enjoy that.
Yes, tasty.
There is a detective involved in this case that needs to be called out.
Oh.
And I'm going to take him to task.
This will be interesting.
Yes. So let's start with the poor victim. He's actually the suspect, but we're going to start with the poor victim of this case, John Kenneth Watkins. And I have a picture here.
He looks like a boy who just took a picture for the high school football team.
All-American next door neighbor, right?
He does, yeah. This looks like the type of person maybe you would want your daughter to go to prom with.
Yeah, he's 20 years old when he's taking this picture.
Or maybe your daughter would want to go to prom with him.
You know, I'm going to hold this to the end, but he looks like a nice guy. And even though we're profiling him as a wrongful conviction, I just want to make it clear, I do not recommend anybody sending their daughter to prom with him. Well, he's much older now too. But anyway, at 20 years old, this is a picture of him when he's 20.
Okay.
He is currently listed, if people want to fact check us or actually get into a little bit more detail. He's currently listed in the National Registry of Exonerations. It's a website that's maintained by the University of Michigan, which we'll be talking about.
Okay.
He's also listed on the Arizona Justice Project of successful overturned wrongful convictions.
Oh, interesting.
Which is the ArizonaJusticeProject.org. So I want to cite a couple of places people can go to look for. And at the end of the day, the real things that happened in his particular case, which we're going to get into in detail, was there was a misidentification. Basically, he was misidentified as the suspect. That was a photo lineup. We'll cover that. Misconduct by police. We're going to dive knee deep into that.
Oh, dear.
And ultimately, he was exonerated by DNA. Sound familiar?
This does sound very familiar.
This case is strikingly similar to the Kirsten Lobato.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to cover it, because I think this exposes a different side that people may not realize with wrongful convictions that the Kirsten Lobato case didn't quite cover. So we're going to get into this. May 26, 2003, Memorial Day, 48-year-old female. She's walking with a friend.
Okay.
Middle of the day, upscale, nice community. Most of the homes there are $1 million plus homes. When a white young male starts walking next to her. Her friend is up walking a little bit further ahead of her. Next thing she knows, this young white male grabs her, drags her into the bushes, and tries to sexually assault her.
Now, I'm assuming this walk was some type of exercise. They weren't just out like checking the mail or something.
They're wearing like small shorts, a little tank top. She's out to exercise with her friend.
When it's really getting warm in Arizona.
Correct. And her friend is quite a ways ahead of her because they are walking for exercise, to your point. And this male just happens to be kind of walking in the area, starts talking to the 48-year-old, and then apparently just decides right now in the middle of town, in the middle of the day, is a good time to rape her. And he literally forcibly drags her into some bushes and attempts to rape her. The friend realizes, hey, my friend should be catching up by now and isn't. So she doubles back and actually catches this in the act and chases the male off.
What does she see, though, in the act?
She just sees this male on top of her friend in the bushes. She can only see their legs sticking out of the bushes.
And I'm assuming, like most landscaped environments around neighborhoods. It's rocky and pebbles.
It's rocky with the big like oleander bushes that are really well trimmed. So she can't really see much when she gets over there beyond their legs, but enough to know something is terribly wrong.
Okay.
She yells at the male. She actually hits him. She punches the male in the back.
Like with her hands?
Yeah. And the male gets up and takes off. Victim's transported to the hospital. Now, this is reported as an attempted sexual assault. Arizona, 2003, attempt sexual assault. Law enforcement's involved. You go to the hospital. You're going to have, and I pardon the term, it's a rape kit.
Yes.
A sexual assault nurse examiner, sane nurse, will come to the hospital on the behalf. And the reason I'm saying behalf is they're there with law enforcement because they're there for the sole purpose of recovering evidence. Sure. They're in a nurse position, but it is very much to recover evidence. So they do a full rape kit. They do all the swabs, all of that good stuff, packages it up, sends it to the lab. There is no semen and no sperm detected in that rape kit. Okay. Now remember, 2003. Okay. We'll come back to this later on. Because the semen or sperm was not detected, there was never a DNA analysis conducted on this case. Okay. Because there was nothing at that time in 2003 to compare against.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. The technology hadn't caught up to where it is today with DNA analysis.
Right. Based on everything that's processed at the scene, and there's not much at the scene. There's some disturbed rocks, right? There's just not a lot there.
Yeah.
There's not a lot for law enforcement to go off of because there really isn't much recovered in the sexual assault kit. Really, the only reason that they really know what happened is the victim's reporting and the friend reporting what she saw and how she interjected. They know they're looking for a young white male, basketball shorts, and a white t-shirt, kind of a blondish, sandy blonde hair.
Which could be anybody.
Oh, right. And this is a predominantly white neighborhood in a predominantly white city that has a lot of young families, right? There's literally hundreds of thousands of suspects.
Yes.
So a couple days go past. A week goes past. There is absolutely no suspect leads. It is a complete whodunit at this point. So kind of the police department that's involved with this particular case continues just their everyday work. And about 9 days later, they respond to a house for an unrelated, non-violent crime, right? And I want to make that really clear.
Okay.
Completely unrelated. It is classified as a non-violent crime.
Okay.
They end up making contact with this young male at his house.
Okay.
And as soon as they make contact, one of the detectives is thinking, this is the same neighborhood that sexual assault happened in 9 days ago. He's a young white male, got sandy brown hair.
Right.
He kind of matches the description.
Okay, but why were they called to this house in the first place?
I don't know.
Because it was
some unrelated, completely nonviolent crime. Okay. I don't know that somehow somebody at that house is associated with. The young kid that they're talking about, they don't even know at that time if that kid's related to this report of whatever this non-violent crime is.
Okay.
One of the detectives is like, fishy. I think this kid could potentially be our suspect on that old sexual assault. Let's take him on down to the police department and interview him. So they go from the house down to the police department and they start interviewing him and reference the sexual assault. Why? Similar description. He lives in the same general neighborhood. So kind of weak, right? To start
That is really weak.
There's a lot of publications online about police misconduct in this particular case. We're going to start with the interview. And in the interview, the investigators, and really it's one detective, the primary detective of this case.
Real quick question. How close was this house to the sexual assault crime scene?
I would say a block, but depending on where you live, a block could be a completely different estimate.
Within a 5-minute walk?
Probably less. I would say within 4 or 5 football fields. Okay. Less than a quarter of a mile. So this detective who kind of has a hunch that this is fishy, I think I need to dig into this kid a little bit further, starts interviewing him.
Okay.
The kid never comes out and just flatly denies and says, I don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't me.
What kind of questions did this detective ask?
Where were you on that day? What was going on? Do you remember talking to anybody? By any chance, were you over in this area where the sexual assault occurred? Just some general questions. And the kid's really froggy.
Detective is solely going off of the description, the proximity of this house to the crime scene.
Correct. As far as we know, yes. The hunch at that point is he looks similar to the description.
Okay.
And the kid lives in the general area. Well, this detective starts lying to the suspect.
Oh, okay. But that's not like...
It happens a lot, right?
It does happen a lot.
But it makes you question, okay, well, what's going on with that? This detective lies to the suspect and says, hey, there's this thing that we think the suspect touched. He didn't say what it was, but we know the suspect touched this thing.
Okay.
We fingerprinted it. Your fingerprints are on it. Can you explain to me why your fingerprints are on it? To which the suspect's like, no, man, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. Well, you know what else is weird? We have witnesses who saw this, who have identified you as the person they saw there. And again, he doesn't say, I wasn't there, they're wrong. He says, I don't know. It wasn't me.
Why wouldn't you just flat out deny being there?
The point here is that this detective is lying. They don't have fingerprints. Right. They don't have a witness identifying this particular suspect, right?
Okay, yeah.
And like I said, we're going to keep building on this. They then do what's called a voice stress test. And it's kind of like a polygraph, but instead of being hooked up to wires, it's listening to fluctuations in your voice.
And I'm assuming this was some type of consensual voice stress test that he
the suspect
agreed to do?
Yep. John Kenneth agreed, I'll take your test.
Okay.
So they hook him up to a microphone, they ask him these questions, and then the same detective, because he's the one who's running the voice stress test, tells him, hey, you failed this test. Like even the computer knows you're lying at this point. This goes on for 4.5 hours.
I would like to ask, were there signs coming within the interview that the detective felt comfortable enough to keep him there that long?
The detective, when confronted with this later, is going to claim he never outright denied what was happening. He never simply said, it's not me, you've got the wrong person, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
The detective is going to justify his actions by, the more I talk to him, he's being froggy. He's not confronting things straight on. He's kind of side-skirting things, and it's just different than what I would anticipate from a normal suspect. So that's the detective's justification for all this is, he just doesn't deny it. Sure. He doesn't admit to it, but he doesn't deny it.
Sure.
Until 4.5 hours in.
And then what happened?
The suspect confesses. He says,
confesses to what?
You got me. It's me. I sexually assaulted her.
Did he say how?
Provides all the details.
What kind of details did he give?
He was walking next to her and that he just felt the need to sexually assault her, and he drug her into the bushes and he sexually assaulted her. He went on to write an apology letter to her.
What did he say he did during the sexual assault?
He forced her into the bushes and he tried to physically rape her.
Did the details that he gave match what she said and what her friend saw?
For the most part, yeah.
Did he mention the friend coming along?
Yeah, that's why he ran away. He admitted it got interrupted by... He didn't know that it was a friend. He just knew that some lady showed up.
That it was interrupted.
Right. But the detective had said a lot of this to him at this point, too.
Okay. So it could have potentially been compelled just because he wanted to leave.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But there's more. He gets booked for this sexual assault. The detective then makes a photo lineup because now that they've identified who the suspect is, and this detective makes this photo lineup and presents it to the victim. And the victim picks him out of the photo lineup. The photo lineup is a little bit fishy too because there's 6 suspects side by side in this photo lineup. John Kenneth is the only one wearing a white t-shirt. The suspect in this case was reported wearing a white t-shirt. So again, fishy, like they're kind of stacking the deck for her to just naturally pick him.
Well, hang on though. Did anyone else in the photo lineup actually look like John Kenneth?
Oh, they all looked very, very similar. The only difference was the color of their t-shirts. In fact, on the University of Michigan website, and we're going to have to dig into this later on, the University of Michigan website actually reports that law enforcement made him wear a white shirt specifically for the photo lineup to match the suspect, and then put the other 5 suspects in different colored shirts just to load the deck enough that the victim would naturally pick him.
That would be quite an underhanded thing to do.
That's why we're covering this case.
Okay.
The problem here is that the victim had already stated she would not be able to assist in any type of a photo lineup. She couldn't help with like a sketch artist she just didn't recall enough physical details about the face to try to just pick him out of random, right? But they tried the photo lineup anyway. She picks him out, and now it kind of creates this scenario that, oh, well, you see, she even picked him. Sure. Again, he's the only one in a white t-shirt. He was wearing a white t-shirt at the time.
It was set up.
It looks like it, right? It's just a problem there. Now, you would think with all of these things going on, a good defense attorney is going to probably be able to get in the middle here. And you remember the Lobato case.
Yes.
Defense attorneys weren't so good.
No.
Well, in this particular case, It never gets to trial. Watkins decides to take a plea deal.
Oh, interesting.
So not only did he confess, but when it came time to go to court, the prosecution made it look so bad for him, like, hey, if you don't take a plea deal, you're probably going to prison for decades.
Okay.
We're going to offer you this plea deal. It's a sweetheart deal. You should probably take it. We'll only make you serve 14 years. The alternative could be 50 plus. So basically, you would think a good defense attorney could get this guy off. There's enough holes in this case, but the prosecution makes such a convincing argument that you're going to go to prison for decades. The kid just gives up. He's like, you know what? I'll take my 14 years. And he does it.
Okay.
And he goes to prison.
That was a pretty willing 14 years to give up.
Well, when you're facing potentially 50 or more, it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
A couple of years in prison changes a man. Right?
I think a couple of years in prison changes anyone.
Yes.
I walk into 4th Ave to book somebody and I'm changed walking out of there.
Yes, you got to immediately go take a shower.
Yeah.
John Kenneth sits in prison for a couple of years and decides, I don't want to be here. I screwed up. I should not have done the confession. It's a false confession. I should not have taken this plea. Prison sucks.
Yeah.
I want out.
Okay.
So he decides to start pushing for an appeal. It's important to note when you take a plea deal, your appeal is even harder than when you get convicted, because a lot of times plea deals will actually have some type of statement or verbiage in there that not only are you pleading guilty, you're agreeing to never, ever appeal this decision. So they're kind of set in stone. So it's really, really hard to get a plea deal. And if you remember the Lobato case, how many times did she request an appeal before she got any traction?
Multiple times.
Same thing here. And all he was saying is, hey, there might be DNA evidence here. They did this sex assault kit. I didn't know they did this when they interviewed me. Can you just test the DNA? I didn't do it. It's not going to be my DNA. So twice he files these appeals. It goes up to the appeals court. The appeals court reviews the case and is like, absolutely not. Stamps it denied. Just like the Lobato case.
Okay.
So he just can't get a break. So he's going to apply to a new project that was set up in Arizona called the Arizona Justice Project.
And this is similar to the Innocence Project?
It's very similar. It's just a state run opposed to a federal run.
Okay.
In 2010, the Arizona Justice Project is going to take on his case. And I just want to show the similarities. If you remember the Kirsten Lobato case, it was the DNA was a big deal.
Yeah.
Blowflies were bigger, but the DNA was a big deal in that case.
Sure.
Couldn't get appeal. 2010, the right people started getting involved. Same thing here. Appeal denied. 2010, the right person's going to come along with the Arizona Justice Project and listen for the first time to John Kenneth Watkins and say, I think you're onto something.
Okay.
Her name is Lindsay Herf, H-E-R-F. And at the time, she was an up-and-coming young advocate pushing for criminal justice reform, specifically aimed at wrongful convictions.
Okay.
She had just started at the Arizona Justice Project.
Do we know what her experience was prior to this?
She did some similar work in California, but she's pretty young at this time. Like, this is her first go at really taking on a case on her own.
Do we know how she came across the case?
He appealed to her.
He appealed directly to her.
Yeah, he went to the Justice Project and said, can you please review my case and take it on? Lindsay reviewed it and said, I think there's something here. I want this case.
Okay.
And this is one of her first big cases in Arizona.
Okay.
And if you remember right, that person changed Kirsten's life. The outcome of somebody taking her case serious changed the entire path.
That person in the Innocence Project.
Correct.
Not this person we're talking about.
Correct. So Lindsay is filling a very similar role, though, here, where she's like, I think this thing might have legs. I think there's something to look at here. Now, Lindsay needs some help with this because the Arizona Justice Project in of itself really doesn't have any power within the courts, if you will. They're just an advocacy, if you think of it as what their role is.
They're lobbyists.
Correct. At the time, though, the Arizona Attorney General's office had a grant program for reviewing DNA. So she takes this to the Arizona Attorney General's office and says, hey, this is a great case for that DNA grant. Let's just process the DNA. What can hurt?
Yeah, let's use up some of that money.
Correct. So she convinces the Arizona Attorney General's office to jump on board with her. This gives her legitimacy. The Arizona Attorney General's office can flex their muscle and get courts to do things, to order things.
Sure.
Right? So finally, the DNA is going to be retested. And largely because they're able to explain, just like the Lobato case, DNA has advanced. That YSTR thing we talked about, there's better advancements. It's probably worth looking at this DNA.
And they're looking specifically at the rape kit.
The rape kit that was taken from the victim hours after the assault. Finally, a judge orders it. The rape kit is going to a lab. They review the rape kit. And sure enough, they find DNA. Now it's YSTR, so it's only the male lineage. They can't say it's this guy, but they can say it's a male in this guy's family.
Sure.
Right? It's not John Watkins' family.
Oh dear.
So the DNA conclusively shows it is not John Watkins' DNA that was taken from vaginal smears of the victim. Got another picture of John here.
Oh, he looks very built.
Notice he's much happier.
Yes, he does.
This is what
smile.
Yeah, this is what 7 years in prison will do for you when you say he's built. He's been on a pretty lean diet and a lot of working out.
Yeah.
This is December 16th, 2010. This is the day John is released from prison after 7.5 years of incarceration for being wrongfully convicted.
Happy day for John.
He is very happy here.
Yes.
More troubling, the Arizona Innocence Project mentions that Maricopa County Attorney's Office, the prosecuting attorney's office that prosecuted John, and the police department are refusing to reopen the investigation and allowing the true suspect to run free.
Why would that be?
Because they aren't interested. They're moving on. Because you know how these corrupt law enforcement agencies and these corrupt prosecutors are?
Yes. Who is this terrible person?
The Arizona Innocence Project makes a big deal. The true assailant has not been identified. And not only has he not been identified, law enforcement is doing nothing to go forward.
Sure. Okay.
Which makes it sound terrible. Like, why don't these people do this? How does this happen? And again, I encourage people to go to the University of Michigan, where they maintain the National Registry of Exonerations.
Okay.
And they say very clearly with John Watkins, the results confirmed he is not the rapist. How does that make you feel?
Well, I'm not sure, because a lot of the things that I'm hearing right now, I'm feeling like, well, a jury heard this case or something like that. I don't get the feel that he took a plea, I guess. It's just not coming across to me.
Yeah, because if a jury would have convicted him, then all of this evidence that they've been talking about would have come out in court. It could have been adequately weighed, reviewed by a jury. And you're right. To that extent, that never happened in this case.
Right.
But if you talk to the Innocence Project, it's because prosecution came in with such a strong arm over him of, hey, go to prison for 50 plus years or take this deal.
Right. And when I do look at the University of Michigan site, before we jumped into this episode, when I looked at those sites, when you told me, hey, have a peek at this, and at the Arizona Innocence Project site, it does give the impression that a jury actually looked at all of this evidence and made the conviction. I think that's what I was taking away. That's what I felt like you were asking me.
No, that's
maybe why you were telling socialites, go look at this.
That's a perfect segue, because if a jury never looked at it, at the end of the day, who is responsible for whatever evidence was gathered that forced this decision to be made? If you think about it, who did the misidentification? Who screwed up the DNA? Who lied to the suspect? What does that misconduct look like? And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the detective. Just like the Lobato case, this stuff pisses me off. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to research the shit out of this guy. Now, you're not going to believe me, and I'm not going to reveal my sources. I went back and I reviewed every case this detective ever investigated.
Oh, I believe you would do something like that. I believe you would know where they were going on vacation for spring break. You
are correct. I dug into the personal life. I've looked at jobs. I know every job he's ever held. I'm not going to mention this next prior bit of how I figured it out. He's got a prior arrest. Before he was hired as a law enforcement officer, he was arrested.
For what?
He was 18. He stole realty signs.
He stole realty signs.
Apparently he had some type of a hankering for real. I don't know what kind of degenerate we're dealing with, but yeah, he actually got arrested for theft.
Why would he do that? Did we know?
I do. I'm not going to get into all the details because it's a whole other episode one of these days. I looked into the personal life of this guy. I know all about his wife, his kids.
Okay.
I know what he drives. I know where he lives. How much fun can we have with this guy?
Probably a ton.
Yeah, it's time for the Socialite Crime Club listeners to help expose this fraud. And we need to hold people accountable. When people go this far off the rails, we need to hold them accountable.
Yeah, burned at the stake.
Yep. So, you know what? We need to identify who this person is.
Tell me, who is this person?
Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
I'm kind of sad you don't have a t-shirt on about this.
I'm a closet Swiftie.
Yeah, hi, I'm the problem.
It's me.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the detective. So for
terrible.
socialites, maybe this is changing the direction of this particular episode. And if we didn't have their attention, I suspect we do now.
Like I'm struggling with this because you're not a terrible detective, unless this was a case you just really screwed up.
But I do know my wife.
Yeah.
I told you I knew his wife.
Yeah.
So what's the real deal here? The real story here is this is total bullshit. Everything I've choked down your throat for the last 20 minutes is
hang
bullshit.
On. What we're seeing as far as what's being shown right now is BS. It's not the whole story of what's being presented on the University of Michigan website, as well as the Innocence Project website.
Correct. And if I had to break it down, like, where does this, like, what is the real issue here? Lindsay Herf is full of shit. And that's what I want to talk about.
And is she still at this Arizona Innocence Project?
Oh, she's not just there.
Okay.
She's the executive director.
Okay, tell me why she's full of shit. I need you to...
Yeah, let's get into this. So what she's doing is she's cherry picking irrelevant details about this case. And she's self-promoting herself as this justice seeker who is able to overturn this terrible conviction and get this kid off. But now I'm going to peel back a couple layers of the bullshit she's spreading, and let's get into the details. Okay? So let's talk about the real case. That morning, our victim, she is not a good victim. She is a real victim.
Okay.
She was assaulted. She's not a good victim. And what I mean by that is she was intoxicated. She'd been drinking heavily the night before. She was still drinking a little bit that morning. In fact, when her friend showed up to get her to go for the walk, her friend was really upset because she immediately recognized, you're intoxicated.
Yeah, who goes on a morning walk intoxicated?
The reason the friend wasn't walking with her when this assault happened is she was dragging ass so bad because she was hungover and still somewhat intoxicated that the friend got upset and just kind of walked on.
You know, I was wondering, like, well, did she stop and tie her shoe? And is that why the friend walked ahead and then she was going to catch up?
So why do we have some discrepancies about photo lineups, suspect descriptions?
Because all of those little details aren't probably in the
And I want to make something really clear. The fact she was intoxicated in no way changes John Kenneth Watkins assaulted her, period.
It does change, however, what her statements are and how she chooses to move forward with the case, potentially.
100%. And we're going to get into the weeds, and I'm going to be very careful. I'm not going to identify the victim for a very specific reason. We'll get there. But this is why the friend was walking way ahead. And the friend goes around a corner and keeps looking back, waiting for her friend to catch up, and is realizing she should have been coming around the corner.
Okay.
That's when the friend doubles back, and she sees, just like I explained earlier, her friend in the bushes with John Kenneth on top of her. She runs up and she smacks him on the back. Do you know, like, the irrigation control stuff that they bury in the ground that turns the sprinklers on and off?
Yeah, there's a box, and then all of the little gadgets and things are inside the box.
Exactly. And there's the little lid that you can take off that box and put back on. In this particular case, that lid is green. Okay. When she hits John, there's one of those lids right there. He touches that lid and kind of uses it for a brief period of time and then drops it and runs.
And none of this is on the websites of University in Michigan of a detail?
No.
Okay.
So in the interview, well, I'm going to back up to that. When she hits him, he touches that little green cover to the irrigation box, and then he takes off. When we interview the victim at the hospital, she's explaining, yes, I'm intoxicated, I'm walking, my friend has left me she's quite a ways ahead of me. This nice young male comes up and starts talking to me. But now we're going to get into the conversation, which Lindsay Herf doesn't want to talk about.
Okay.
He just moved there from back east. He lives in the neighborhood. He's a swimmer. He is a lifeguard. Like, he starts presenting all of this personal information about himself.
That he's just talking to her, being nice as they walk.
He hasn't met any new friends. He's kind of lonely. He was out for a run that morning. He sees her and just starts talking to her because she looks nice.
Okay.
And she's very engaging. She doesn't think anything negative about this. It's just a nice young man talking to her. The next thing she knows, he grabs her, forces her into the bushes, is on top of her trying to pull her shorts down and sexually assault her. Lindsay Herf doesn't want to talk about this conversation, and we'll explain that here in just a little bit. Now, the victim also is not 100% cooperative. She wants him to go to jail. She is sticking to her story, plus we have the friend. This very much happened. She is a victim. she's not too sure she wants to testify. She's not too sure she wants to be in front of a jury. She definitely doesn't want to get into the finer details of DNA and all that other stuff. It just
Is it because it was just such a traumatic event for her, do you think?
She's a single female who lives by herself, who just wants, she doesn't want to deal with this. She just wants out. And you have to respect that.
But she does want some justice to take place.
Right. You asked the question and I intentionally didn't answer it for you.
Of course.
Let's talk about this non-violent, unrelated crime that got law enforcement to John Watkins' house.
Okay.
He just moved into the neighborhood, just like the suspect explained to the victim.
Okay, so we have some corroborative statements.
Used to be a lifeguard, by the way, and a swimmer. That also matches. Height, weight, hair color, physical description, all match.
Okay.
A moving company who had just finished moving the entire family into the house was removing some boxes from the house that the family requested. And as they're throwing these boxes into dumpsters, one of them falls and out comes a whole bunch of paper with printed photos.
Oh no.
Of child porn.
Oh.
This box is full of child porn. The moving company immediately freaks out, calls law enforcement, who responds to the scene to find a box that says John's bedroom on it.
So did John put these himself back into the moving van and ask them to remove them, or was it the
It was
parents?
part of the stuff he was throwing out intentionally, thinking that it'd just get to the landfill and nobody would know the difference. But the moving company stumbles across this, calls law enforcement. Law enforcement finds hundreds of child pornography images in this box with the box labeled John's bedroom.
And the parents had no idea.
As far as I know. Now, I don't claim to be Sherlock Holmes, but I can figure out where John's bedroom is from the movers who were reporting this.
Yeah.
So yes, I ended up in John's house talking to him about this child porn, when in the back of my head, it all comes together. Just moved in the neighborhood. Same description. A swimmer, used to be a lifeguard. And it's not an unrelated crime. It is another sexual crime. And I'm hundreds of meters from the crime scene.
Did he say where he had obtained all this child porn?
Yeah, he printed it.
Off of his own computer?
Off his own computer, which we seized. And sure enough, it did all come from his computer and his printer.
And his parents had never used the computer. It wasn't theirs to use at all.
No, he admits. He never denies this is his child porn. He likes child porn. Now, you've been a cop in Arizona. How long do you go to prison for hundreds of pictures of child porn?
Oh, forever.
Like 60 years.
At least.
Remember that. So yes, as I'm having this conversation with the sexual deviant in his house that matches the description 9 days after this assault, I'm not the best detective in the world, but common sense told me.
But you're pretty good.
There's a possibility
this could be
I
our
should
suspect
probably
for the
explore
assault.
this.
Yes.
So I do arrest him on the child porn. I have more than enough probable cause for that. I take him to the police department. I do start a 4.5-hour interview.
Okay.
He never denies walking around the neighborhood that morning. He never denies having contact with a lady that morning. He just talked to her, but he didn't do anything. Later on, when he's doing his confession, he's going to mention details of that conversation that only the suspect would know. When he's giving details of what happened when the friend hit him in the back, he's going to admit to touching that green sprinkler box that, of course, Lindsay Herf does not want to talk about.
Nor is she talking about the child porn.
And I knew he touched the green sprinkler box, so I did tell him, your fingerprints are on that box. How can you explain that? To which he said, I was there.
Oh my gosh.
When I got to the end of the interview, this was something I did a lot, and it works really, really well. I want it in his words, not my words. I don't want someone to come in and say, well, this detective just manipulated.
You had him do a written statement?
No, an apology. I would usually tell suspects if they confess to a crime like this, hey, at some point you're going to be in court. You're going to be in front of a judge. It would look really good that you take the time. You've already confessed.
Sure.
Take the time to write an apology to the victim. I'll give it to her.
Okay.
But write this apology in your own words of why you're sorry. And he did it.
Okay.
And again, he describes details that only the suspect would know.
What kind of details can you give any?
The conversation, exactly where they were at, the bushes, the rocks, the friend, what the friend said when she hit him, all of these details, what she looked like as far as the victim. Like he knew there's no doubt that confession is him confessing to this actual
And
issue.
this has never been publicly published for Lindsay Herf.
If you go into any of the stuff that Lindsay Herf is pushing, it's the DNA. The DNA exonerates him, which we still got to get into here.
But what I'm saying is Lindsay Herf has never published this apology letter of these statements that only he would know.
No, God, no.
Yes, I suppose it would hurt her narrative terribly, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. So let's talk about the voice stress test. Voice stress tests are bullshit. I'll be the first one to say I was a certified voice stress test examiner. They can be manipulated. I'm not saying I ever manipulated one. There's a protocol you have to follow. It's a tool. It's nothing more than a tool. Sometimes me telling a person, I know you're lying,
stresses them out.
Or it doesn't. I have no credibility. They don't care. But for some reason, I have them take a test on a computer and the computer says you're lying. They're like, oh shit, well, the computer knows, right? It's a tool to help with the confession. In this case, he does take the test. He does fail miserably. And it was a tool that I used to say, look, even the computer knows you're lying. Like, just be honest.
Yeah.
And which he was. The other thing that needs to be mentioned here, this is not some interview that's done in a back room where there's no recording. There's
a single light in a dusty cement room.
This is a very nice interview room in a very nice police department.
Smoke lingering around the suspect's head.
I keep hitting him with a phone book.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It is recorded. It's on audio and video.
There's bright lights.
Yes, it is very clear. I think I offer him drinks. Like it's a very casual
brought him a Happy Meal
interview. Yes. And if there's a question, review it. That's why we record it. From the minute he goes into the interview room until the minute he leaves, the entire thing is recorded. Yeah, Lindsay doesn't want to talk about that either. There are specific details of the assault that I never gave him. The only way he could provide them would be to be there. The photo lineup. Let's talk a little bit about photo lineups. 2003, Maricopa County Attorney's Office wanted photo lineups on cases. Even if you had a confession, even if all of the other evidence happened, they wanted a photo lineup.
I think it was like that for a while.
It was. Photo lineups are problematic, and I hated photo lineups.
They were really a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Well, and what people don't realize is there's a computer program that you have to pick. I'm sorry, not everybody that I could choose from that looked like John Watkins was wearing white t-shirts.
Right. Well, there were times that I would create photo lineups and the images that were selected by the computer program, because I couldn't just go in and actually filter and hand select myself, there would be Asian guys popping up with black guys and a white guy. And I'm thinking none of these people match what I put in. The AI was terrible.
Right. It was a bad policy. I hated photo lineups.
I think a lot of people don't realize how very little sophisticated tools law enforcement had to them and still has to them, quite frankly, that they're forced to use.
Yeah, but there's a whole other aspect here that Lindsay Herf does not want to talk about.
Yes.
Who was this photo lineup shown to beyond the victim? John Watkins had already confessed. He was already arrested. He had already been booked. He pleads. He never has a trial. Outside of the victim saying, that's him, this photo lineup is never shown to anybody else.
To have some type of opinion of whether or not it was valid.
It's irrelevant. It was done as a part of a policy that the Maricopa County Attorney's Office wanted photo lineups on cases. It was never shown to a jury. It was never used to secure a search warrant. It was never used to go arrest somebody. It was done as part of policy, and then it sat in a case file to this day. It's absurd that the Michigan University has that as a reason of this somehow false conviction, and that Lindsay Herf to this day is still touting the photo lineup. The photo lineup did not have shit to do with anything.
It's a technicality she can use to put a feather in her cap.
And I just said the photo lineup never made it to a jury. Why did John Kenneth Watkins take a plea deal?
Because he didn't want all the child porn to go towards time in jail.
We have a legitimate victim, but we have a bad victim. This victim does not want to go to court. This victim does not want to talk in front of a jury about what happened. And I'm not saying child porn is a victimless crime. What I am saying is we don't know who those victims are.
We've talked about this in another episode. Child porn is very difficult to prosecute sometimes because we can't identify ages of children. We can't identify if some of those children have actually gone through puberty or if they're actually an adult, especially when we can't see their face.
And jurisdictional issues. It could be taken in some third world country where the United States and our laws
have nothing to do with.
Correct. So
if there's even photos of faces, like going about identifying who those kids are.
In cases, it's nearly impossible. So what the Maricopa County Attorney's Office was dealing with here is, hey, John, we can send you to prison for 60 years. That's what they had.
Okay.
On the child porn. Or you can plead guilty to this assault, take 17 years, you'll be a lifetime probation sex offender, And this way, the one victim we do know of, will never have to come into court and testify. It's a sweetheart deal.
Yes.
It is a very good deal. And John knew it was a good deal. That's why John pled guilty, to avoid the 60-year sentence for the child porn.
Yes.
Lindsay Herf doesn't mention this on the website.
Well, why, Lindsay?
It's kind of weird.
What are you hiding, Lindsay?
Even when he goes to prison, if you remember right, the appeals court denies his first 2 appeals. Why?
Because they knew.
Because details matter.
Right.
They reviewed the case and they're like, this kid's full of shit. DNA has nothing to do with this. So let's talk about the DNA.
Okay, this makes so much more sense.
Yes. Let's talk about the DNA. Why do we have a suspect profile, though? Why do we have male DNA from our victim that's not John Kenneth Watkins?
There could be any number of reasons.
And there is. So let's talk about our victim. And this is why I'm not going to reveal her identity.
Did you say she was married? I don't remember.
No, she's a single female.
Okay. Single female.
But she is having an affair with a married man. She has been having this affair for years.
Okay.
The night before, do you want to know why she was so intoxicated?
She was out with this man.
She was out with this man all night. They had crazy drunk monkey sex. She wakes up the next morning late, having to go for this walk that she committed to before going out with this man. And yes, his DNA is still inside of her vagina.
Oh, this makes so much more sense. Okay.
If we go back to court and explain this in front of a jury, what does it require the victim to do?
To testify.
But not only testify.
Now she has to out her lover, who is married.
With kids.
And it would destroy his life.
I'm the one who interviewed the victim. I'm the one who had to go back and tell her he's been released from prison. Here's why. We want to re-indict him. We want to go back. We have a great case, but you have to testify.
She wouldn't do it.
She refused. She told me there's no way I can do this to him. I will ruin his life. I will ruin his wife's life. I will ruin his kid's life.
And how many years later was that? And was she still having an affair with him?
7.5 years later. No longer. But it would still have to come out because we had to go into court and explain the DNA. So he would even have to testify.
That he had had sex with her.
The consensual sex. Because otherwise it's the suspect's DNA, according to Lindsay Herf.
Right.
Let's talk about re-victimization. 7.5 years after this assault, this victim has to make a decision. I would rather this monster who assaulted me be free than me have to go through everything you're saying. What you're asking me to do is worse than the assault. And why am I asking her? Because of Lindsay Herf.
Right. Not only is it worse than the assault, what you're asking me to do is worse than every child who has been looked at and who knows what over in his child porn collection.
So at the end of the day, John Watkins is going to walk free. Not because of a miscarriage of justice, but because Lindsay Herf perverted the criminal justice system and figured out how to re-victimize this victim so bad that she just quit.
Technicalities.
Yeah, so good job, Arizona Justice Project. That one's a good win.
Yeah.
Now, what do? How do you victimize this victim even more? Publish it. Flaunt it in her face. If you Google John Kenneth Watkins today, you will find a number of sites that says he is exonerated. He is not the rapist.
And worse, it's on academic websites.
And then rally around this incredible injustice that you solved. Yeah. Put it as a feather in your cap. It's now on your CV, your resume.
Yeah.
And get promoted.
Hey,
to become
University of
director.
Michigan, I hope someone over there is also listening to this here's how you actually look at an investigation overall. As
the detective that did the photo lineup, as the detective that interviewed John Watkins, I would love the University of Michigan to explain to me where they got, I made him wear a white shirt.
Right.
Because there is nowhere they're going to be able to find that or back that up. So 2010, and I say this all the time on this podcast, and I think some people might get a little bit offended by the way that I classify this, but guess what? John is going to be released back into the wild because he's a predator. That's what, when I say they're released back into the wild, I mean we're releasing a predator back into the wild.
Yeah. Well, we do kind of live in a wild society, I would say.
Yeah. So when you trap a predator, keep him caged up for a while, and then you release him back into the wild, what does he do?
They're going to prowl.
4 years later, fast forward 2014, John has a job now. He's working. He's trying to be a productive member of society. Remember, he's still on lifetime probation, though, for the child porn. So he has a probation officer.
people who are addicted to porn, especially child porn, don't just stop.
No. Sex offenders are prolific in their recidivism.
Yes.
I said it. It's such a hard word. I practice that all the time.
Good job.
His probation officer, he knows the real deal. He's all over John.
Good.
He does a surprise inspection of John's work laptop, not his home laptop, his work laptop.
Oh my gosh.
That looks like child porn. Seizes the work laptop, sends it off to the lab. The lab does a full examination. Over 100 images of child porn found on his work laptop.
Oh my God.
Obviously, John's got to be interviewed on this. So the probation officer sits down and is like, John, what's the deal? And he's like, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm addicted to child porn. I told that other detective 10 years ago.
They let me go, though. It wasn't a big deal.
Can you just test my DNA real quick and just wash this away?
Hey, could you call my friend Lindsay for me?
Yeah, basically, 100%. He admits to everything. He admits to downloading it. He says he did it all within the last year. He admits to viewing it. He fully admits, I have a problem, which good for him. However, it's not his fault.
Never is.
He explains that his work laptop doesn't have any type of control features that prevent him or thwart him from downloading child porn. So if his employer would have just simply put a tool on there that would prevent that, he would have been fine.
Yeah, if I just couldn't get a credit card to gamble with, like, it's Chase's fault.
If I could just not find my crack dealer on the corner.
It's his fault for hanging out there.
If she just wasn't walking intoxicated down the road that morning.
She wouldn't have flirted with me the way she did.
Right. You said academia. I want to come back. I left that when you said it, but let's come back and talk about that. You said even academia was reported. There's a thing in Arizona called the Arizona Summit Law Review. And every year it's a group of attorneys, mainly defense, but sometimes prosecutors are involved as well. Judges will be in attendance. And they go over issues within the law, specifically Arizona law, that need to be further looked at. They need to be examined. In 2015, now let's get our timeline. 2014 is when John is found with more child porn.
Okay.
Which he confesses to.
And he says he has a problem, but it's not his fault.
And don't forget, he's on probation for child porn.
Yeah.
Back to prison you go, John. In 2014, right?
Yeah.
A year later, in 2015, some lady looking at the Arizona Innocence Project, looking at the Michigan websites, basically copy and paste what's on those, comes to the Arizona Summit Law, actually gets some credibility, and makes a presentation of how DNA testing has to be required.
Because everything that's on the internet is 100% true.
Absolutely no effort put into looking at the real details of this case. I've kind of walked around this until the very last minute of this podcast.
Who was this person?
Just a dummy.
She doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I like how you put that. Let's talk here for just a second.
Okay.
In 2003, when I had this case, why did I not submit it for DNA testing? He never got her panties down.
Right.
He never penetrated her.
That makes so much sense. So there's not even any...
There is no way his DNA would be in her vagina.
Well, period. And that's why you had to use the ruse of his fingerprints being on the irrigation lid.
Such a dumb argument, and that is well documented. However, he did assault her. He attempted to rape her, which does require a sex assault kit, and they're going to do the full gamut just in case, because sometimes... Because
what if she had scraped him with her fingernails? Or
they're wrestling back and forth, his finger comes in some type of contact around that area. Like, there's a million reasons why you're going to take every precaution to do those tests.
Did he ever get his genitalia out that he could even try to potentially?
No. So when we start talking about results of semen or sperm,
it was irrelevant.
It's completely irrelevant. And you know what? Lindsay Herf doesn't want to talk about that either.
Of course she doesn't.
So where I want to leave are our socialites, if you will, with this episode. The Kirsten Labata case. Terrible. In so many ways, right? I reviewed that case and it pissed me off because I did realize, like, no, cops can do some shady shit.
And you spent a very long time researching that case.
Prosecutors can do terrible things. We can have bad judges. We can have completely ineffective defense. And I think those things need to be brought forward. They need to be realized. But you can't just what happened there, so it's happening everywhere else.
Yeah.
And what happens is when you do that, it allows people like Lindsay to say, oh, well, look at what I did on this case. It's the same thing. You can't take it on face value. You got to peel back those layers.
And little nobodies to come and copy and paste what they see on everybody else's website.
Correct.
And try to make it face value.
Right.
100% true.
We're just parroting the bullshit at this point, right?
Right.
And it's really important, I think, for our socialites to understand every case is different. Every cop is different. Every prosecutor, every defense attorney, every social justice advocate is different. And we can't just simply say, oh, it's a wrongful conviction and all of a sudden it has stock. Or, oh, it's a successful conviction and all of a sudden it has stock. You got to peel back the layers. So when we start talking, we've got some other cases coming still. When we start talking about wrongful convictions, you can't just throw them in the same bucket. You got to dig into the details and really examine what's going on there.
And determine why somebody can be benefiting from it without really giving sensible details.
So I've got a little photo I'm going to leave you with today.
Oh, he's aged quite a bit.
Yeah, on the picture on the left here, that is John Watkins in 2003. By the way, I don't think I told you, that first interview I did at his house, his 20th birthday. It was literally his birthday. Happy birthday, John.
His birthday.
Yeah. The picture on the right is his more recent Department of Corrections.
He has quite a bit of hair gel in that picture, doesn't he?
You know, for being in prison.
Yeah, what is he using for hair gel?
Oh, they get really crafty. Have you seen Something About Mary?
Yes. Oh, that's bad.
Yeah,
that's so bad. It almost looks like he has like an upside down mustache on his chin or something. This is
like the old Western, like with the handlebar mustache, but it's inverted on his goatee.
Chin.
Yeah, I see what you're seeing there.
That's kind of
that's a little crazy.
Interesting. Though his neck looks very thick. He's been working out quite a bit.
I think he's got some free time on his hands, probably.
Yeah.
He will be released back into the wild in 2035. Now, luckily, he is still on lifetime probation, so I'm sure we'll give him 2 or 3 years before he reoffends again. It's interesting. Nobody's taken up this appeal yet. I don't know where Lindsay went, but she's not going. And here's what's crazy. Arizona Innocence Project. Easy website to find. Just Google John Kenneth Watkins. The University of Michigan website. The National Registry.
None of them mention that he's back in prison.
None of them mentioned the child porn, period. Unrelated crime, an unrelated nonviolent. And we've talked about child porn. People are like, oh, it's a nonviolent crime. Unrelated nonviolent crime. They refuse to even say he has a child porn addiction.
Right.
They refuse to say that, hey, we got him out of prison. Oh, by the way, a couple years later, he went back.
Yeah.
For child porn. They
refuse to say, hey, you should be so lucky he was in prison because he probably would have been going after your kids next.
Right. Hopefully, we did Kirsten some justice. I wanted to do the other side of the coin some justice, just to give people some really good perspective on there.
You gave Lindsay a little bit of justice, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm going to come up with a rating system for some of these cases because we always get to the end and I'm like, these freaking people. So Lindsay gets an F.
Yes.
And on a scale from 1 to 5, I'm going to give her 5 Fs.
Okay.
But not F as in failure. I'm going to give her the old
go F yourself.
Go 5 times over, Lindsay. Like you need to fix this. You are the executive director. You can be transparent. And she's done some good work. She has done some good work with wrongful convictions. This is not one to stick in your cap. Like, fix it. Be transparent. Let people know. It's
and
really
don't allow academic institutions to follow in those steps.
Right. 100%. That's what I will leave the socialites with this week.
Interesting case. Thank you for joining us, socialites. Let's air out Colorado. It's time.
It's got a lot of attention.
It does have a lot of attention. You are quite the subject of scrutiny in this matter.
Fine. We'll talk about it. Colorado versus Christopher Jones.